Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Ja, eller vi kan prata.
Oh yeah.
Is it okay if we have us take pictures? Just like a few when Mikael's presenting, right? Or others?
That would be great. And this is kind of easy to use.
No problem. It's okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Oh, there's a clock.
Do you have a presentation? Do you have a presentation? Oh, really?
I don't know if I can present that.
Oh, yeah, no problem. He has to write. That part is right.
Good afternoon, everyone. I see a few of you yawning. Did you guys have a nice lunch today? Can I get a hard prize? Hard prize! But why is it like so low energy? Yeah. I mean, we want to save energy, but you know, you can shout. Can I get a hard prize?
Hult Prize.
That's so much better. Okay. So now we have a mini symposium about energy and environment by Energy Tech Meetup. So I'd like to invite upon our ever charming Amanda to take over.
Thank you. Hi everyone. Good afternoon. So it's really my great pleasure to help kick off Hult Prize at Tokyo Tech 2019. And I'm happy to see all of you here. So the theme of Hult Prize this year is climate action. And this is very much related to a lot of issues of energy and environment that we hear being discussed worldwide every day. And this is why we at Energy Tech Meetup, which was co-founded by myself and Grace Kako, which some of you might know, are so excited to really partner with Hult Prize Tokyo Tech this year. So today, myself, Uyanga, and Kabir from the Energy Tech Meetup team are here as well. So let's So, what is Energy Tech Meetup? So, Energy Tech Meetup is basically a community for anyone with an interest in innovation related to energy. And we try to support the innovation ecosystem related to energy doing three main things. So, one is events and seminars, one is networking, and one is community engagement. Because we believe to really stimulate innovation, we need to get a bunch of different people in the same room and get them talking and discussing. So we do have several events coming up, such as our next event in January, focusing on community-driven innovation in the energy sector on January 28th. So if you are interested in energy, please do follow us on TokyoTech or LinkedIn or Facebook or all three by searching Energy Tech Meetup or going through this QR code. And we're also very open to anyone who'd like to get involved, either as a speaker or a volunteer or in some other way. So, without further ado, I'd like to start the mini-symposium on energy and environment by inviting Professor Jeffrey Cross. So, Professor Cross is from the School of Environment and Society at Tokyo Institute of Technology. Here he manages a transdisciplinary group of students who are researching biofuels, Japanese energy policy, and education tech. He is also the director of Online Education Development Office, which creates EDX and MOOCs. Is that how you say? Okay. Professor Cross got a PhD in chemical engineering from Iowa State University in 1992 and has been working in Japan for 25 years. Today, Professor Cross will share his thoughts about student-led innovation examples in an interdisciplinary engineering.
Thank you, Amanda. So my name is Jeffrey Cross. I'm a professor in the Transdisciplinary Science and Engineering. At TokyoTech, we have a number of degree programs, and one of the degree programs is called Energy Science and Engineering. So I'd like to talk a little bit about my laboratory and students' research in the laboratory, trying to promote innovations in energy. So in my laboratory, it's very different from a normal laboratory because I have students working in a number of different fields. The fields themselves range from energy policy and also developing technology related to biofuels. I think one of the things I'd like to mention about having interdisciplinary laboratory, there's a lot of opportunities for learning, as shown in this slide. So I mean, I think the laboratory that's interdisciplinary is more like a real life situation, so students have many opportunities. Won't go through all the various aspects of it. But I think this kind of goes back to the point Amanda just made. So by having an interdisciplinary group, we bring together lots of people, lots of human resources with various skills. They also obviously have various skills in which they can contribute to do novel things related to innovation. So I think the topics that I'd just like to briefly mention here are research and development is trying to meet the society needs. And so there are many needs related to new technologies that can decrease the impact of global warming, particularly CO2 reduction. So policies at the government level often are needed to stimulate R&D, and new business models are needed to create value. So one of the bottlenecks, though, in developing technology, particularly it's expensive, it takes time, particularly those related to hardware or something related to chemical processes. So often cases when we develop new technology, it actually competes with existing technology. So therefore, it's important to create economical solutions that solve these problems. The other issue is this technology cycle actually takes time. And so sometimes it can take quite a bit of time to develop new technology. So my experience actually started when I worked at Fujitsu Laboratories in Fujitsu, and I was working on semiconductor memories. One of the memories I was working on was called ferroelectric random access memory. This memory was a non-volatile memory. It's like what your memory is in your smartphone, but it had particular characteristics, and these characteristics, if we didn't compete with existing flash memory, there were some advantages. But if we try to compete with a known technology, then it doesn't work. So one of the things I recently helped organize was a guest lecture on the importance of entrepreneurship education by a professor at Brown University here at TokyoTech. And some of the things he mentioned is that something you may not think about, but potential customers are not always logical. Although you may develop technology from a logical point of view, customers may like it for a different reason. So the other thing he mentioned was undergraduate entrepreneurs tend to develop technology that's focused on mass markets, whereas those probably in graduate school, doctor students tend to develop technology higher value chain, particularly focusing on business to business. So what I'd like to briefly mention is things that are going on in my own laboratory. So I have 11 students from 10 different countries in my laboratory, focusing on different types of research related to education and technology, biofuels development, and also energy policy. So this is different from a lot of laboratories where you're focusing on just one particular theme in your laboratory. So I think this gives students a lot of depth. It gives them both depth and also gives them an opportunity to learn various aspects. So in my laboratory, if you look at my homepage, you'll see that the 3 different groups, and the 3 different groups already have their own logos. So one of the things I found that motivates students in my laboratory is letting them choose their own research topic. So the energy policy group is looking at power distribution between Japan and Korea. Yanga's over there, she's working on Mongolia, energy and environment. And then we also have students working on biofuels. So some of the things you might not think about, but for example, a topic which there's a lot of potential to create energy from is from waste. And particularly one topic that's been kind of looked at is sewage, right? You might not think sewage contains a lot of valuable materials, but it actually does contain gold and some other metals, but not in large quantities. So if we can develop technology to extract these types of materials, there's value in that. In addition, particularly here in Japan or Tokyo, we have a lot of food waste. That food waste requires energy to process the material, and then we just throw it away, and that's wasted. So it's better not to waste it, but if it is, you might as well enjoy something based upon that. So in this case, this is called toast ale. So it's based upon throwing away bread and then developing a technology or drinking it later. So in my laboratory, other students are working on looking at waste rice. If you throw that away, we can use Japanese koji. Koji is used for fermentation of sake. So instead of producing sake, we produce a biofuel or potential biofuel called butanol. So then we've taken a waste product and we're producing something of value. Some other students in my laboratory are looking at producing chemicals or fuels from looking at waste products from wood or paper processing. This is a little more technical, and it's been going on for some time, so we're hoping we can develop some new technology related to that. And then one more example is on using solar radiation to try to use that to store heat in water form and also generate electricity. So given my time, I'd like to wrap up here and say energy policy is actually quite important. If students can learn about that when they're doing research related to fuels, that's quite important. I think an interdisciplinary laboratory stimulates multi-layer thinking and communications, And I think the self-driven research themes highly motivate students and inspire them to do great things. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So please do save your questions till the end. And we'll go to our next speaker, which is, oops. So, Dr. Is that it? Okay. Okay. So the next speaker is Dr. Miguel Yoko, who I have had the pleasure of working with as well. Dr. Yoko is the Science and Innovation Counselor as well as head of the Science and Innovation Office at the Embassy of Sweden in Tokyo. He has worked as a senior advisor on research and innovation to the Minister of Enterprise and Innovation of Sweden, advisor in the European Commission, to the European Council, and is a member of the Industrial Research Committee at the Royal Swedish Academy of Engineering Sciences. He has a background as an associate professor in chemistry and has researched innovation in nanotech and material science, such as for energy storage. Dr. Yoko will discuss transformation. Please give him a round.
Thank you, Amanda. And Amanda, having a Swedish background, pronounces my name Swedish. Usually here I use the more English Michael Jacob. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. So I'm Michael Jacob, Science and Innovation Counselor at the Swedish Embassy here in Tokyo. And this means I try to connect Japan and Sweden together here in research and innovation. We are both very strong research nations and also strong innovation nations. So this is to make sure that we'll be prosperous societies also in the future. I'll be talking on transformation in some different perspectives here. But how many of you have been to Sweden? A few. I hope most of you know about Sweden anyway. But I'll say a few words about it, and also in the context Sweden-Japan. So we are a country that is larger than Japan, but we are population-wise about 30% of the Tokyo metropolitan area. We have a fairly small home market. That means that when we sell products and services, we have them world class. So we are very export dependent. We have fairly much lower also CO2 emissions than Japan. I will come back to that a little bit later. We have about 30% of Tokyo metropolitan areas in population, although we have a fair number of multinational global companies in Sweden. We build our own fighter aircraft. IKEA, I guess you have seen Spotify, Skype, you use Tetra Pak in materials, Sunbeam. ABB, now Hitachi actually purchased or went into a strategic partnership for the smart grids last year. So also in energy and energy-related companies. Northvolt is actually a startup and also one of the unicorns now in Sweden in its multi-billion-dollar valuation here, building gigafactories in Sweden. But we also have a very, very dynamic startup scene. So a lot of innovation coming from startups and not least from universities. We rank quite high in innovation since they started measuring the European Innovation Scoreboard. We have always been number one from the EU countries. In the Global Innovation Index, we are number 2. SDG Index, this one is from last year. I think it's almost a close call now in this year with Denmark, and fairly high in competitiveness, although Japan is higher up in competitiveness level. We also have research, other type of prizes than the Hult Prize here. Nobel is of course quite big in Sweden. It's very impressive, and congratulations to Japan here for yet another laureate this year. We have still a few more laureates than Japan, but I think in a few years this situation will change. The actual Nobel Prize has a connection to energy, but also to innovation, so it's much more than research. Alfred Nobel was a real innovator, had a lot of patents. He created industry, and dynamite, for instance, was one of the big innovations he had, which is energy, of course, released really rapidly. Here we have also your latest laureate, Akira Yoshino, a photo from this Tuesday evening at the Swedish embassy where we had a reception for him, together with also, I think it was 9 of the former laureates, so more than 1/3 of the Japanese laureates were present there. So, transformation. Sweden, we have been working for a number of years and decades, actually, in transforming our energy, but also our industry towards sustainability. We have a political goal aiming at being the world's first fossil-free welfare nation by 2045. Already now we have, it's more than 90% of our electricity that is fossil-free, that about 40% is nuclear, 40% hydro, and then wind is the biggest, but nuclear is going down and the renewables are increasing. So, with transformation and energy, with the law of thermodynamics, important here is that we can, of course, transform energy from one form to another, and we heard some examples of this also on biofuels and so on. And this transformation is quite important, I think, here in the future of energy. For instance, light. Common way, photovoltaics is, of course, the most common way of making electricity from light, but there are also coming now much more large-scale other type of concepts in focusing the sunlight. But now speaking at Tokyo Institute of Technology, with a lot of engineers, a lot of people who can have ideas, bring forward innovations, I would like to mention also other opportunities. This is an application from a Swedish company called Exeger, located at the campus of the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm. I think it was there where Amanda actually studied. They have a Gretzel solar cell technology that also can be fed ambient light. I think this will be a product coming out fairly soon. Wireless headphones that can go into infinity mode with just ambient light. They have covers for Kindle and also other portable devices with infinity mode. So the main message in this is that it is possible to transform energy and I think be very prosperous. SoftBank actually went in with a quite significant funding on this. In the transformation of energy, think energy harvesting. We will now move into 5G, IoT, artificial intelligence. We will need to feed more and more of electronics with energy. So pyroelectrics, piezoelectrics, triboelectrics, flexoelectrics, thermoelectrics, and of course photovoltaics. So energy we have all around us. It's just to make sure that we make use of it, and important here we can use this both to create our sustainable society, but actually also for markets. So research and innovation for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, our final speaker for the day, for this mini-symposium, is Mr. Edward Sumoto. So, currently, Mr. Sumoto works in the Tata Group on energy and IoT, while also working on multicultural dialogue in Japan through a volunteer group. Previously, Mr. Sumoto has worked in the field of community development, disaster resilience, and renewable energy. He has also worked with tech transfer at the British Embassy as a science officer and with various German tech developers. Today he will discuss the important topic of business and sustainability and how to strike a balance that enables or kills innovation. Please welcome.
Thank you. I've forgotten that I have written such a long introduction, so you can kind of guess that I'm going to talk long, but I won't. So that was pretty much a summary of what I've been doing over my last couple of decades. But today, my theme is about enablement, basically. So how do you enable certain technologies? How is it accepted? We talk a lot about intermediate technology, appropriate technology. But sometimes there's a lot to do with how to understand diversity. Diversity is a big theme for myself as well. We'll talk about that on another occasion, but yeah, it's all about choice, how you consume, how you monetize, and how you enable certain seemingly illogical things to logical. So I'm going to just start with 3 quick questions. It's going to look like it has nothing to do with the stock, but what do you think is better, white rice or what they call mugimeshi, wheat rice? So since we don't have too much time, I'm going to say both of them look really good. And the actual, so if anybody's addicted on Facebook like myself, I'm sure you've seen this article floating around in the last 2 weeks, but basically back when the Imperial Navy was made in Japan, they recruited people from the countryside saying, you can only eat all the white rice you want. Results, they used to eat this, but they started eating that, so thousands of them got scurvy, and they couldn't fight because of the lack of nutrients. So the answer is no, actually it's curry. So and that was actually the solution, and that's why they had Navy curry here. So that gives you more nutrients. So the answer here was not either or. It's adding something else. But if you think about it, it's also a lot about logistics, the infrastructure, enabling farmers to be able to deliver lots and lots of vegetables and meat and stuff, and have a whole economic system. This one, which one is better? Wood-fired stove, gas stove. Seems obvious that the gas is better for your health. We have massive problems with PM10 and all these particles from the wood, and people get all sorts of lung disease. This was true. Actually, they tried this a couple decades ago, maybe 30 years ago, and they had to stop it. The reason being, these guys didn't produce any particles in smoke. What's the problem with that? That meant there would be more mosquitoes. So countries like India and lots of other places, they have more cases of dengue and all these other diseases. So it's not always obvious what is the right choice. Obviously, for lung health and all this, you choose this, but you need to find what is fit for the local environment. Yeah, additional visual aids over there. And this is a controversial one, so I'll just leave it at that. It's controversial. What's really better? Most recent article, I'm sure you've seen, as it stands, EV production produces more CO2 than conventional cars at the moment. So they're going to try to do something about it. Hydrogen is cool, but nobody can afford it, so it's another issue there. So appropriate technology is very important, and it's always been a running theme over the last few decades in researchers and business developers alike. Now we're talking about energy today, and energy is quite confusing. it's invisible. As it is right now, there are companies who are trying to add tracking features, to add metadata to the energy and say, where this where this energy comes from, what the source is, and so on. But it's simply, once it's in the grid, you can't really distinguish it. So actually, it was only at the beginning of the century, last century, that people made a law here in Japan saying that electricity is an actual commodity that you can steal. Because if it's invisible, how can you steal it? So smart grid, we have this whole theme. The language has developed over the last maybe decade. Some people used to say smart grid and then society and community and smarter city. The IBM used to have a whole department called Smarter City, just to distinguish from the smart city. So, we have this whole issue of how to enable renewable energy, integrate different sources, but it's really hard to make additional value of renewable energy, the environmental value, pay. Are people going to pay for it? It's a lot of money, and people don't want to pay for it. Would you pay for environmental value? And oftentimes the answer is pretty difficult. So it hasn't really happened yet. That's why a lot of smart home solutions, other technologies are finding it hard to make a business model that works. Now, when you talk about electricity, this is like 20 years ago, when I used to be, in my early 20s as a grunt officer for the UN, I was going around and I used to go to Sri Lanka a lot, and this was one of my favorite settlements. It's an illegal settlement on top of a lake. They just had a local wood industry, so they took all the wood dust, not wood, but wood dust, and they filled up a lake. And so they were living on top of this very precarious area. But you can see there's actually an electric meter. So the government decided to give them electric meters as their rights and for safety and for education and all this. Sri Lanka does have a very high education rate. So when I first went into one of these houses, I was kind of shocked about my own prejudices. And the reason being, they had electricity. So what do these people who have illegally settled, but obviously want a better life like any of us have in their homes? So they had the usual fridge. Of course, it's a very hot country, so they had a ceiling fan, okay? And they had TV. Almost every house had a TV. And then they had a stereo set. And then every house had an aquarium. So it was pretty amazing. You have a brilliant house, and but I'm like, why not, right? So, but why not? But back in the 90s, this is from Bank Mesma, but they used to say, everybody should transition to electricity and have less pollution. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. The source is important, obviously, and how you consume electricity. But when you provide the plug, there's no stopping. So India is very precious to me. I've grown up with lots of Indian people in Kobe, and I do work for an Indian company, but we've become very digitized and electricity heavy. So we are now the most polluted country in the world. So it's you see how simply enabling technologies to flood the market is sometimes quite dangerous at the same time. So what matters is a system and a cycle that is sustainable. I don't have too much time, but let me just go through two examples. One is this case in London. So London has a very strict law saying you can't drive gas-guzzling cars into the city. So UPS has these huge trucks that you see, and they're trying to make it all electric vehicles. Fun fact is that one of these take the equivalent of 10 households in the UK to charge. So that's quite a lot of energy. But they wanted more cars, so they had 65. They wanted over 100. Otherwise, their business wouldn't work. That meant the local power company would have to invest $380 million in hardware. It didn't make sense. So what they did was they worked together with consortia and also academics, startups, and they ended up only investing $25 million investing in digital technology. And guess what? They had so much waste in the grid that they were able to find 3.5 gigawatts of excess capacity in peak time. So probably unthinkable in many other places, but this is what happened, and now they have over nearly 200 cars. Finally, Germany, there's lots of bioenergy villages. These are very small, like 100-some or a couple hundred villages, but basically at least 50% of their energy comes from locally sourced biomass. And most of these are farmers who first benefited from investing in renewable sources, including solar and so on. So they do a lot of things like use excess heat for the cattle and so on. And let's go through these. Biogas is very popular in Germany. They now have 5 gigawatts, 9,500 plants in Germany. That's like almost like 5 nuclear power plants. It's amazing. How does it work? First, it's a business ecosystem. Second, it's automation and work-life balance and paradigm shift. So the ecosystem is quite easy, but quite difficult in most countries, including Japan. You need a partnership with farmers, or farmers turn into 100% full-time gas plant owner, and then they have a system where they exchange the fuel, the biomass source, and also the sludge and all the waste that comes from the gas tanks. The sludge, you put it back into the farm. But Germany is a cold country. During the winter, it cannot put it into the soil. So what they do is, they have a system where this can be balanced out. And also, big thing is energy crops. You don't get 5 gigawatts from cow dung. It's 90% water. So what happens is actually there's a full industry that produces plants solely for fermenting. So it's almost a cheat, but that's how the cycle is working, and everybody's happy. Also, you can sell heat. There's a feed-in tariff for heat, so that makes it big. Second, work-life balance. We're talking about smart grids and all these distributed energy management now, but this is kind of the norm in Germany because it's a country where shops are not open on Sundays, right? And after 8 o'clock, it's not like Japan. So nobody works after hours. Nobody works on weekends. So that meant also by law. So that's why you have remote management systems and remote response systems from design. So it's a design thinking process as well. Finally, not much text here, so I'll just skip through it. But basically, what it's saying is bioenergy is more expensive than diesel, for example, per kilowatt hour. But if you think about it, all the money, if all the biomass is sourced locally, you're paying your local forester, your local baker, whatever, your farmer, the money within the community. So the money is not going outside of the community. So that's how they justified this difference and said that bioenergy is cheaper. So anyway, I'm sorry for the overtime, but I think these things are a combination of how you enable practical technology and make sure that it's sustainable and stays rather than for else.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much, and one more round of applause for the speakers. For our panel discussion. So please go ahead. So, thank you again for some really interesting and really important talks. And I really think that to enable innovation for energy and environment, we need a strong innovation ecosystem that incorporates government as well as industry, as well as academia and researchers. And this is exactly the mix of professionals we have on the panel today. So I'm very excited to kick off this panel discussion. So before we go to the audience, I'd like to start with one question, or maybe two questions. So the first question basically is, from each of your three perspectives, what do you think is the key enabler or the key driver that's needed to really enable innovation in clean tech and energy and innovation further compared to today? So what's that kind of extra nudge you think is needed from your perspective? What do you think?
So, tricky question, and of course the content emission and so on. But I think really to be successful, you need to find a business model. So, maybe it can be a social innovation, of course, that has one logic. There can be other type of logics with other systems. If I just say a few words about this example I took on the Exeger, just the band over on the headphones with gradual solar cells that can be fed even in here in this kind of lighting. We were looking for a long time in having tiles for roofing, for facades, for a lot of different things where I think it could have been a big change. But suddenly when you find something where you'll be having customers willing to pay quite a lot also, for the convenience, that is a really successful business model.
Yeah, thanks Amanda for that tough question. I thought you'd start with something easier, but I think it's a lot of things. It's just not one thing. You know, I used to work at Fujitsu, and Fujitsu Laboratories. We were developing a memory. You had technology, there were problems, you had to solve those problems. And in Japan, when you work for a company, if you fail, you're done. You don't advance. So you have a lot of incentive not to fail, right? And so it really takes a lot of grit. So you start with ideas, technology, talented people, bring them all together, implement them, and just making a product, and then go from there.
Yeah, very difficult question, but I guess it's really one side is understanding why you need energy. That's always been the issue with energy. It's so readily available once it's provided, and in many cases, I think we're at a point where we can really look beyond borders and see what models there are and import-export business models. And we really need to do that in order to motivate, especially Orthodox Japanese companies and others to change or incorporate.
So it seems the key to energy and environment innovation is finding business models and finding good people to carry them out. Motivated. Part of the solution, right? So should we turn to the audience? Do we have any questions? There we go. We'll start with you and then we'll come to you.
Hello. So my question is related to source of electricity, like from a physics or from physics point of view or engineering point of view. After a decade, how do you think the source of electricity will change? Like, what will be the that's it. Like source of electricity after 10, 15 years.
I mean, anyone of you could.
Yeah, it could be a lot of things. I mean, some people say fusion is just 10 years away, but yeah, it's. I think we're going to find, like, this example, much more harvesting and localized energy sources. So where it's appropriate, whether it's heat, there's also heat conversion, like the nitrogen-based engine that can convert heat into energy and so on. So anyway, there's it'll be more localized.
Comments?
I think your question is dealing with, for example, the energy mix of the future, and I think yes. So energy mix is kind of governed by government policy, various issues, incentives from the government, where money should be invested, what technology should be developed. There's a lot of work going in that. I think one of the things the IEA, who does a lot of modeling, they do modeling for the future. What's that model going to look like? And then they look back and they say their model didn't match. So it's very, very difficult to predict what will be in the future, but modeling is ongoing.
Very interesting question. I think it will be a lot of different sources. But underlying that, I think there will be two types of technologies that will be very important to enable the transition also more to renewables. And one of them is energy storage. So if you can enable the storage of the electricity in various ways, then the incentive also, of course, is then it's not just when it's windy that you can use the electricity, or when the sun is shining and so on. And the second is also the smart grids, to be able to also feed in your electricity. If you actually also can get paid for electricity that you feed into the system, then we have strong incentives.
I think we had a question here.
Yes, thank you for your presentation and for sharing some, data with us and a visualize how it's growing in the renewable energy space. My question was particularly to all of you who are working in both research and also consulting with the local governments and governments abroad. Could you share some of your experience working with government entities and governments abroad, and maybe any challenges that you overcame? That's partly because we work with the government.
Maybe some from government. In that case, I would try to point out the importance for government also to more understand the systemic perspective, and try to find incentives to make a shift from technology push to demand pull. So, for instance, in setting up, let's say, research and innovation programs, so on, to try to focus on, we're trying now to focus on finding solutions to societal challenges. And when you know what you need to solve, it's easier for different actor groups to get together. You'll have universities, you'll have institutes, you'll have industry. What we're seeing is public sector also steps in much more, and actually individuals also. And in a long term, of course, coupling back also with this with business model thinking, so on, when you find solutions to societal challenges, and when we find solutions to societal challenges, or part of solutions in Sweden, this is of course solutions that are interesting for a lot of other countries. Increase competitiveness. Now we are both in Sweden, Japan, in most other countries in the world. There's a shift also now towards the UN Sustainable Development Goals. They have a big impact also to societal challenges.
So I myself haven't worked with government, but I've actually had PhD students who were government employees in the US as well as Japan, and they describe the process by which the Japanese government creates energy policy by setting up a panel of experts who provide advice from various sectors in society, and then they put out the policy for public comment. So my understanding is it's trying to get a consensus on what's doable based upon technology and various points of view. It takes, I think, quite a bit of time, and then it ends up being a compromise because various people have various points of view. So that's my comment.
The advantages and obligations of a government is doing things top down. So it's brilliant power in that too. I mean, you see China is leading the world in renewables, installations, and investment, all this, but at the same time, rightly. So, and you have to protect jobs, interests, and goals, and all these things as well. So they're building 30 more coal power plants. So it's quite hard to manage this balance. Back when I was with the British, they did a brilliant thing back then. So right now, but they merged the Department of Energy with the Climate Change Department. So they had PhD, Tech, and they also merged education with business and innovation. So this kind of top-down decision, merge the brains, something like that's that works. But at the same time, it's quite difficult to do also very practical things that protect citizen interests. There's the whole Brexit thing, but back then being in the EU actually helped because it was mostly landfill in the UK back then. But because of the regulations, they started doing energy waste to energy. So it's also important to get that sort of other governments.
We have time to field one more question.
One more question. I see 2 hands, so let's, 3 hands. So, Aishwarya, it's your choice.
Which one of you?
This one over here, in the back.
Good afternoon. My name is Budita from TokyoTech. I'm a material engineer, so I'm a data scientist myself, and my work is on solar panels. So the reasons why I say this to you is because, believe me, that I'm one of the frontmen of the clean tech and clean energy stuff. But the way I see it is that this transition has become more and more political. It's more and more, it started to lose its principles, its first principles way of thinking. It starts to lose its logical way of thinking and starts to become a laws break things to say. You want to go to, I don't know, like 50% renewables and woo, everyone is, the crowd is cheering and stuff like that. So my question is, how can we make sure that these current transitions is really the next logical step for our societal evolutions, and not only trendy things, political things to do that we are doing because other countries are doing. That's my first question. And my second question is...
Can we keep it to one?
I'm
sorry. I think we have time for it. Sorry. Thank you. Who was
Just have the mic. Another difficult question. I believe we're all very aware and sensitized people in this room, and also whoever's working on this technology policy. So, that's already a big difference. Does the rest of the society think it's the logical next step? Is really, that's where the business model comes in and everything. Am I willing to sign up with 100% renewable energy company and pay that extra 2 yen per kilowatt? But yeah, I think that sort of education and inclusion is key.
Yeah, based upon evidence, typically we would like to see decisions made. And actually, I had a PhD student look at decision-based models for selecting the right criteria. So if you want to develop a nuclear power plant, what is the criteria you select based upon deaths or fatalities per terawatt? So there's a lot of ways that how do you define what's the criteria for developing the power? What is the criteria for selecting it? I mean, obviously, from a scientist or engineer's point of view, that's decision-based, but I think when we bring in the public, we bring in other factors which they're more concerned about. Then it's not evidence-based decision, unfortunately.
There is no good answer to the question, but some reflections, I guess, is possible to make. And be coming back also to this with government. So taxation is, of course, one big instrument to see how you tax the CO2 or how you support renewables and so on. But the reflection I get on when it comes to how people or politicians also influence how people perceive renewable energy or CO2 emissions. There is a big con in the whole dialogue. I see that is, for instance, in the calculations of biofuels, so organic material made from renewable resources, you calculate that there is a zero emission of CO2, which is untrue, because you'll have emissions of water and CO2. There it is, of course, in a bigger context to see how CO2 has been absorbed when you have created it. But so there is no really true right and wrong in the system that somehow you have to try to push in the right direction.
I think that's the last question we have time. So give the speakers one more round of applause. Marco, who is the head of Hult Prize, wants to thank you as well. So cute. Thank you. And thank you for joining the Mini-symposium.
that was really, really insightful. And if you guys have more questions, I think you can always reach out to the speakers today during the networking event that will happen later this evening. And moving on, we have a motivational speech by Mr. Nagesh Rao, who is the Director of Technology of Small Business Administration in the US Department of Commerce. So he would be calling us on Skype, and
Hey, how are you?
Good. Frank here.
Hey, Frank.
How's it going, man?
Good. Can you see me okay?
Yeah. A little bit dark, but.
Alright, give me a
Silhouette?
second. Let me turn on more room light. Give me.
Okay, much better.
Yeah. Alright, hold on a second. Let me turn on more light. Alright. How does that work?
Awesome. Do you want to see the audience really quick?
Alright, yay!
Keep you there so we can get a feedback.
Okay.
Yes. So we have a very special guest right now. Nagesh Rao from Washington, D.C. He's been a mentor of mine for many years. He is now currently the Director of Business Technology Solutions at the Small Business Administration of the U.S. government. In his role, he has previously helped fund over 200 accelerators under this program to give access of $2.5 billion. So with that, I have to hand the floor to Nagesh right now.
Good afternoon, everyone, and it's a pleasure to talk to you all today from the United States of America. It is now 1 in the morning here, so I would normally be asleep, but Frank, being a friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, and colleague, I said yes, I'd stay awake for this, and I just recently gotten back from overseas travel to Dubai, so I was like, well, I'll muscle through it with the holidays and everything. So, congratulations to the students and congratulations to you all for, participating in the Hult Prize. I think it's really important to keep in mind how innovation, entrepreneurship, technology, these are constructs that help drive for a better future for tomorrow. And I think that's what the Hult Prize is trying to help excel. It is trying to look for better innovation, sustainable solutions, and implement, operationalize these projects to actually have a grander, more positive impact on the world around us. The notion of a for-profit bottom line only, unfortunately, that's a thing of the past. If we're going to survive as a society today, we have to start thinking about double and triple bottom line endeavors, and that means people, planet, and profit in today's modern economy. And it's fascinating to watch the next wave of innovation and entrepreneurship come about, because it's not necessarily being driven from U.S. perspective. It's actually being driven from a global perspective. Some of the best startups and technology solutions that are starting to come about are coming about because of international and global cooperation. through the public-private partnership we worked with over the years. It was called Law, and it was partnered by, initially founded by Nike, NASA, the CID, and the State Department. And we had these prize challenges that would push for looking for innovative solutions for pressing challenges in today's economy, in today's world. And we looked at topics such as water, clean energy, green chemistry, next generation health. These are the areas of interest, these are the areas of utmost importance. I'm sorry to say, but if someone's working on another, .com or social media startup, I don't see how that's to us. I think the solutions that are precedent need to be more focused. Have to be on areas like food and water and agriculture, manufacturing and robotics.